Untold Black Stories. If a judge starts to doubt, he dies as a judge. And Marlon Kelly had always taken pride in being very much alive. But for the first time in years, a case had knocked him off balance. The courtroom held its breath. Not the silence of respect, but the kind that presses against the chest. The kind that knows something final is coming. Judge Marlon Kelly sat upright in his chair, black robe crisp, expression unreadable. He had worn that robe for 22 years. His rulings were known for being clinical, sharp, and nearly unshakable. No conviction he'd ever handed down had been fully overturned. Not once. Across from him stood the accused, Jaden Rose, 19, charged with armed robbery. The case was clean, a surveillance video, multiple witness accounts, a juvenile record that didn't help. Even Jaden's defense attorney had stopped arguing innocence. He was just begging for leniency. "Mr. Rose," the judge began, his voice smooth, practiced, steady. "This court, having reviewed the evidence and heard witness testimony, finds you guilty as charged. You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison." A pause. A held breath. And then, a quiet sob from the second row. Jaden's mother. But Jaden himself didn't flinch. He just looked up, directly into the judge's eyes, and said in a calm, steady voice. "You don't judge facts anymore. You just judge people you stopped seeing a long time ago." Marlon's fingers tensed slightly. He didn't strike the gavel immediately. But then he did. Case closed. In the hallway, colleagues and assistants swarmed him. Brilliantly handled. Another long, hard one, done right. No doubt they'll file an appeal, but come on, they won't touch this one. Kelly never misses. He offered polite nods, a restrained smile. But inside, he felt the familiar burn of pride. He hadn't bent. He hadn't blinked. He had ruled. As he always had. And yet, the boy's words lingered. Like a cold fingerprint on the back of his neck. That night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed under the covers, the darkness too quiet. His wife, Alicia, slept peacefully beside him. She trusted him, fully. Blindly. "If you found him guilty, then he was guilty," she had said. "You don't get things wrong, Marlon. Not in your courtroom." But tonight, something was wrong. At 2:13 a.m., he got up. Walked down the hall. Entered his study. The desk lamp flicked on. The room filled with that sterile yellow light that had seen so many rulings made. He pulled the file. Jaden Rose. He read it again. Slowly. The evidence was solid, but something gnawed at him. The video, the face was hard to see. The witness testimonies, a little too rehearsed. Jaden's voice, a little too calm for a guilty man. "Why can't I let this go?" he whispered. He pressed his fingers to his temple. Tried to exhale it out of himself. But his mind betrayed him. Because suddenly, uninvited, another face surfaced. A young man. Also black. Nervous. Barely 20. From years ago, one of Marlon's very first cases. Back then, he didn't have a reputation to protect. Back then, he had made a risky call, not guilty. Everyone had doubted him. But he'd felt something. He'd believed the boy. And he'd been right. The boy had looked him in the eyes after the verdict and said, "If it weren't for you, they'd have broken me." It was one of the only times Marlon had ever allowed himself to feel like justice, actual justice, had happened in his courtroom. And now, for some reason, he needed to know what had happened to that young man. It had been nearly 20 years since Marlon Kelly last thought about Terrence Walker. He found the old file tucked in a locked drawer in his study, from the days when cases were still on paper, not in databases. The folder was thinner than he remembered. A few statements, a blurry photo, and his own handwritten notes in blue ink, faded and curling at the edges. Terrence had been 18. Accused of assault and robbery outside a liquor store. Witnesses placed him at the scene. The victim had a concussion and swore it was him. But something in the boy's eyes, not defiance, not guilt, but confusion, had stopped Marlon short. Like someone thrown into a story he didn't write. The prosecution pushed hard. Marlon's clerk quietly urged caution. But young Judge Kelly made a decision few rookies would dare. He ruled, not guilty. It was risky. Bold. Some called it naive. But Terrence had walked out of that courtroom a free man. Before he left, he looked back at Marlon and said, "I'll make it count." And back then, Marlon had believed he would. Now, sitting in the quiet with two open cases before him, Walker and Rose, Marlon saw the troubling symmetry. Both young. Both black. Both soft-spoken. Both accused of being present at the scene. One had walked. The other had just been handed 10 years. Why had he trusted Terrence and not Jaden? Was it instinct? Youthful idealism? Or had he turned to stone over the years, unshakable, but also unseeing? He turned to his computer, opened a browser, and typed. Terrence Walker, New York, 2004. Multiple results. He clicked the first. Terrence was now a defense attorney in Chicago. Founder of a nonprofit offering legal aid to urban youth. The photo showed a composed man in his late 30s, arms crossed, standing behind a podium. A banner behind him read, "Second chances start here." Marlon stared at the screen. The room was silent, but his thoughts roared. Terrence had made it count. The next day, Marlon called him. It rang twice. A calm, professional voice answered. Terrence Walker. Marlon hesitated. Then. "Terrence, this is Judge Marlon Kelly. I don't know if you remember." "Sir," Terrence said softly, cutting him off. "I never forgot." A pause. "Your courtroom was the first place I ever felt seen." They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Marlon asked about the nonprofit, the work, the kids. Terrence said one thing that stuck. "Most of these boys don't need a miracle. They just need someone to stop assuming they're already lost." That night, Marlon reopened Jaden's case. The facts hadn't changed. But the weight of them had. The file didn't feel clean anymore. It felt heavy. Later, Alicia found him still in the study. "Is this about that kid you sentenced?" "Yes." "You're not second-guessing yourself, are you?" "No," he lied. She smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't make mistakes, Marlon." "Not you." He nodded. But the words offered no peace. The next morning, as he rode the elevator up from the garage to his chambers, one of the young clerks stepped in with him and handed over a folded newspaper. "Judge, they mentioned you in a column today. Thought you might want to see it." Marlon unfolded the paper. The headline screamed in bold. "Is Judge Kelly now locking up the innocent?" He stared at it. The elevator dinged. And for the first time in years, Marlon Kelly wasn't sure what floor he was on anymore. The headline stayed with him longer than he expected. It sat on his desk all day, the paper still folded open to the column. The bold title stared back like a quiet accusation. "The infallible Judge Kelly, is he now jailing the innocent?" There was no direct allegation, just questions, implications, and carefully worded doubt. But every line stung like a splinter. One passage, in particular, echoed in his head. "When reputation becomes more important than doubt, we begin building prisons out of pride." Most of his colleagues brushed it off. Some even joked. "If the press isn't coming for you, you're not making real decisions." But Marlon didn't laugh. Because for the first time in many years, he didn't feel attacked. He felt exposed. He worked through the following days as usual. Efficient. Controlled. Predictable. But each time he reached for Jaden Rose's file, his hand would stop halfway. He hadn't formally closed the case, it still lingered in review, officially pending final processing. He reopened the witness transcripts. Rewatched the surveillance footage. And nothing had changed. But something had shifted. Not in the facts. In him. On Wednesday, just before closing time, Judge Barton stepped into his office without knocking. Older, seasoned, respected, the man who had once guided Marlon through his earliest cases. "Got a minute?" He sat without waiting for an answer, pulling off his glasses and wiping his forehead with a folded handkerchief. "I read the piece," he said. "It's a hit job. That's all. They're fishing for cracks where there are none." Marlon said nothing. Barton studied him. "You know what I've always admired about you? You never flinched. You ruled clean. Final. No wavering. That's rare, Marlon. But here's the danger. A pause. Doubt. Not the good kind. Not the kind that sharpens you. The kind that bores into you slowly. You let it in once, and every case after that looks like a mirror. And pretty soon, you're not judging law, you're just judging yourself." Marlon sat in silence long after Barton left. He reached for Rose's file again. Held it in his hands. Tighter than he meant to. "I don't want to see myself," he murmured. But that was exactly what was starting to happen. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay beside Alicia, staring at the ceiling. She had long since stopped asking what kept him up. The next morning, when he entered his office, a dark blue envelope waited on his desk. No return address. Inside, a formal letter. No emotion. Just an invitation. A scheduled meeting. A location. A time. Marlon stared at the words. Then folded the letter slowly and placed it in his drawer, leaving it unlocked. The newspaper hadn't broken him. No article ever could. He was built for pressure. His entire career had been about resisting influence, not absorbing it. But some moments, especially the quiet ones that arrive in the form of neatly folded paper, carry the weight to crack foundations. And this one had just arrived. The scheduled meeting took place in a building without a nameplate. A stark gray facade. A quiet security check. No welcoming signs, only silence and purpose. Marlon knew the place well, the Federal Judicial Appointments Office. This was where careers changed. Where ambition met judgment. He had dreamed of this building since his early years on the bench. Back when he first realized he wasn't just good at the law, he was made for it. Back when becoming a federal judge was more than a goal, it was a definition. Now, walking the familiar corridors, he reached the third floor. Inside the appointed room, 3 people waited, a man in a navy suit, a woman with a tablet, and one familiar face, a former district attorney turned federal advisor. Judge Kelly, the advisor said with a warm smile. "We're glad to have you here. Please, take a seat." The conversation lasted under an hour. Nothing unnecessary. No posturing. They didn't need to be convinced, they already knew. Your career speaks for itself. Your discipline, your consistency, your composure, all of it builds trust. You are stability. And stability is what the federal system needs. Marlon listened, still and composed. These were the words he'd wanted to hear for years. And yet, something in them felt muted. Only at the end, as they closed their folders, did the man in the suit add, casually but deliberately. "We've seen the press piece, of course. Don't worry, it's nothing. It'll pass in a week or 2. We just want to make sure your appointment doesn't become part of the noise. The commission's decisions must be unshakable. Doubt is a parasite, it eats away at everything. You don't doubt your ruling in the Rose case, do you? Marlon looked at him directly. No. I sleep just fine, he said. And he lied. When he stepped out of the building, the air felt heavier than before. As if someone else was walking beside him, someone who knew the truth. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table. His coffee had long gone cold. Alicia entered quietly and sat across from him. How did it go? Good, he replied, barely above a whisper. So this is it? Maybe. She smiled and placed a hand on his forearm. You're ready. You always have been. You're the one who never hesitates. He looked at her. And for the first time, he couldn't say yes. Because doubt was already sitting at the table. And no one could ever know. Judge Marlon Kelly stared at the Rose file as if seeing it for the first time, though he'd reviewed it at least 10 times. Everything looked correct. But the same details that once confirmed the conviction now whispered something else. The witness statements, nearly identical in phrasing. Too clean. The interrogation transcript, strangely short, no probing, no follow-ups. And the video. He played it again. The grainy footage, the same hooded figure. Same frame, same movement. But the face, still unclear. And Marlon whispered to himself. I don't see him. He paused the video and stared at the frozen image. The evidence that had once sealed the verdict now felt like a question left unanswered. A reminder that certainty can be an illusion, if you stop asking. A knock at the door. Excuse me, Judge, his assistant leaned in. I came to collect the Rose file. It's due for final closure. Marlon didn't respond right away. His hand rested on the folder like it was warm. Give me one more day, he said. You can pick it up tomorrow. Of course, the assistant replied, a little surprised, then disappeared. Silence returned. Marlon remained still. His eyes drifted across the desk. To the left, the Rose file. To the right, the letter confirming his federal appointment. 2 paths. Each demanding resolution. But he couldn't choose both. Leaving Jaden behind meant carrying doubt into his future. But reopening the case meant casting doubt on the very system he'd built his life upon. And those two truths couldn't exist in the same man. He would have to choose. And that choice wouldn't just shape what came next. It would fracture the life he'd lived until now. Like every night before, he barely slept. Judge Marlon Kelly lay awake, staring at the ceiling where the faint shadow of the chandelier branched out like diverging roads. His thoughts weren't chaotic. They were precise, the same cold, clinical analysis he'd relied on for decades. But this time, the subject wasn't the law. It was himself. He thought about every case he'd ever ruled on. The difficult ones. The high-profile ones. And in each, he had done what was right. He hadn't wavered. He hadn't failed. Even when verdicts were appealed, it was always for technicalities. Never had an appeals court reversed his determination of guilt or innocence. Not once in 22 years. And that was what made this case unbearable. Because if he admitted he had failed once, it meant he could have failed before. At dawn, he was already at the courthouse. The halls were silent, not yet filled with voices and footsteps. His office greeted him with its usual scent of paper and old coffee. 2 sheets of paper lay neatly on his desk. To the left, the appeal request in the case of Jaden Rose. To the right, his confirmation letter for the federal appellate court. 2 choices. 2 futures. 2 truths that couldn't live in the same man. He sat down. Let his fingers run along the edges of both documents. He reread the Rose case one final time. Slowly. Calmly. Then opened the federal letter. It was all there, the dream that had shaped his entire career. He exhaled. Picked up the pen. He signed one document. And slowly, carefully, tore the other into pieces. Then again. And again. The scraps fell into his drawer without ceremony. He stood, smoothed his jacket, and left. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, he felt completely at peace. Driving home, he didn't check his phone. Didn't replay the decision. Didn't doubt. The choice is made, he thought. And it silenced every voice that's been tormenting me. That evening, a brief announcement aired on the evening news. Today it was officially confirmed that Judge Marlon Kelly has been appointed to the United States Federal Court of Appeals. Members of the commission praised him as a model of stability, reason, and discipline. The screen showed a clip of Marlon shaking hands, nodding, smiling faintly. His expression, calm. His eyes, clear. And the audience was left without an answer. As to whether this was a triumph. Or the moment he lost everything that made him human. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, drop a comment and hit that subscribe button. We're building something real, and we can't do it without your help. More untold stories are coming.